This award represents a 40-year journey of research and communication in agriculture. Back then in the early 80s, I was working in France on photosynthesis. In the research centre was a small library, and in that one day I read a book that would change my life and career. I read the book from cover to cover and I thought herbicide resistance is going to be a big deal and I should work on it. Within 6 months I was back in Australia at the University of Adelaide at the Waite Agricultural Research Institute. I had a grant and my mission was to start a herbicide resistance research program. When I heard of the herbicide paraquat failing on a farm in Victoria, I thought, I've got to go and examine this. I drove the 500 kilometres or so to Elora, south of Ararat. I had a spray can, it was my only piece of equipment, and I sprayed the samples of this reportedly resistant weed, but I got 100% kill of the weeds. When I checked the application rate, I'd probably put 1,000 times the normal dose on, so I was drowning the plants with the herbicide. So I went back and built some good equipment so I could spray at the proper rates, and then as soon as I did that, indeed the plants were resistant. So of course I characterised the resistance, and this helped me to win another grant from the forerunner of GRDC, and that gave me the funding that enabled me to continue this research. Finally, in 1986, I was awarded a lectureship at the University of Adelaide with the mandate of starting a research and teaching program on herbicide resistance. This also involved university teaching, which gave me the opportunity to interact with students, and that's gone on now for 40 years, nurturing and working with fine young students. In the 1980s, herbicide resistance was also evident in annual ryegrass, and by the mid-1980s, herbicide resistance was becoming a significant problem in Australian agriculture. Suddenly, I was the right person in the right place, and with significant GRDC funding and other funding, I was able to buy all the necessary equipment, bring together and commence a research team. By the end of the 1980s, we really wanted to study how it was that these plants were resistant. There was a very good lab in France, so I went back to Strasbourg to work on these enzymes that we call P450s, which are responsible for much herbicide resistance. Well, I learned a lot while in France at Strasbourg, but the big breakthroughs has only come in more recent years. Well, during the 1990s, herbicide resistance in Australia became a really significant problem. And equally, GRDC recognised and substantially invested in herbicide resistance research. And in 1995, I took 6 months to work at Syngenta at their global weed and herbicide research centre in England. And during that time, I could see how a company like that discovered and developed herbicides, and that was invaluable experience. Well, around the same time, I was involved in a consortium bidding to establish a national cooperative research centre, known as a CRC in Australia. And this CRC would be focused on weed management systems. We were successful, and on my return to Adelaide in July of 1995, I became the director of this new CRC. During the 1990s, herbicide resistance became the most severe problem in Western Australia, and in response, there was the creation of a research centre called WARI at the University of Western Australia, and I had the opportunity to come and lead and establish this research centre in 1998. From day one, GRDC invested heavily in our ARI research and continues to do so to the tune of about $1.5 million per year. In our first year, 1998, I published our first paper on resistance to glyphosate in weeds. I spent the next 20 years at ARI doing what I love most, which is research. Over that time, our ARI team has made major contributions to our understanding of herbicide resistance. We've identified the genes that make resistance possible, including the P450 genetic breakthrough that I had first studied in France in the early 1990s. I love research, but I also love communication. I love communicating with farmers, those that advise them, other researchers, and the agricultural corporations that serve our agricultural industries. As a result, I've given hundreds of presentations and training sessions over the decades, and during that time I've met many brilliant people. For example, in 2007, I met farmer and inventor Ray Harrington while giving a presentation to a farmer group, and he told me about his idea for a weed seed destructor. I was intrigued, and we met further and resolved to collaborate on its development. GRDC invested heavily in this research, and from this, the HSD was developed. The HSD is a great example of grower adoption of research. Harvest weed seed control, on which we've done much research, has now been adopted in Australia and internationally. Another example is the better use of herbicides by growers. Rotation and diversity are now practiced. So in 2010, when GRDC honoured me with the Seed of Light Award, of course I was absolutely delighted. The award recognises an individual's contribution to communicating the importance and relevance of research outcomes to the wider grains industry. A watershed event in my research career was in 2013 when we organised and held the Global Herbicide Resistance Conference in Western Australia. For the first time, more than 150 of the world's leading scientists on resistance from 30 countries came together under one roof to give presentations and discuss herbicide resistance. It was a huge success, and in 2017, the US National Academy of Science organised the second global symposium in Washington, DC. Well, for herbicides, I always say, when on a good thing, don't stick to it. So I thought, after 20 years, I should take my own advice and retire as RE Director, and I have done so and been replaced, and my successor is the excellent Hugh Becky. I've continued part-time as a professor at UWA and had 3 years on the GRDC board as part of my change in activities. The GRDC has played a very significant role in my career, and it's just delightful to receive this most prestigious award, the GRDC Seed of Gold. I've always tried to bring research outcomes of direct relevance to the Australian grains industry. In Australia, we've got a productive, sustainable and successful grains industry. That is helping to feed the world. It's very satisfying to know that I've made a contribution to our industry. We've adopted and maintained no-till, and we've massively increased grain production, and I have played a role along with many others. Now, as I transition to retirement, I've got time to do some new things. I have some farmland devoted to grain production, and I've taken the time to write my story of my career as a memoir. And as I've written in this little book, as I retire as a professor, I'm not retiring from my research interests, nor from agriculture, nor indeed from life. I'm simply preparing for the next chapter.